Do you ever find yourself maybe wide awake at 3 a.m., replaying that awkward thing you said last week? Or just, well, fixating on what you think are your biggest flaws?
Oh, absolutely. We've all been there, lying awake, wishing we could just sort of
Yeah.
erase those parts of ourselves.
Exactly. But what if, and this is what we want to explore, what if those very things you label weaknesses are actually maybe hidden strengths? It's kind of a mind-bending idea, right?
It really is.
So our mission today in this deep dive is really to try and flip the script on how you see these parts of yourself. Instead of thinking flaw, think, what does this really say about me? How can it empower you? Or, and this is important too, how might others, exploit it if you're not aware?
Precisely. Because these so-called weakest traits, they're rarely simple. They tell a much deeper story, don't they?
Yeah.
They reveal struggle, sure, but also your values, your potential. And yeah, sometimes blind spots we need to navigate carefully.
So it's about understanding, not just fixing?
Exactly. Awareness and understanding are absolutely key.
Yeah.
When you get a handle on these double-edged swords, you're not just coping, you're actually leveraging them.
Okay, I like that. Leveraging, not just coping. So where do we start? One that kept coming up in our sources, and I think resonates with a lot of people, is being, well, too sensitive.
Ah, yes. That
And,
feeling.
a casual comment sticks with you for days. Or you walk into a room and just instantly absorb the mood.
Like a sponge.
Yeah, and maybe struggling with boundaries because of it. It feels like a vulnerability, almost makes you open to manipulation maybe, and that constant emotional buzz can even affect your health.
It's a really profound experience. And often the roots of that intense sensitivity, psychologically speaking, can be things like deep-seated wounds or past experiences where maybe anger wasn't safe to express. So it kind of built up, leaving you near an emotional tipping point.
Okay, that makes sense.
But here's the really fascinating part. The flip side, the strength.
Yeah.
This deep feeling often signals incredibly high emotional intelligence. You're not just feeling intensely, you're picking up on nuances others completely miss.
So, wait, are you saying that what looks like maybe poor boundaries in a sensitive person might actually be a sign of deep empathy? And the trick is just learning to manage it.
Exactly right. That capacity makes you incredibly compassionate. It often fuels creativity, intuition. You understand people beyond just the words they use.
Okay.
Think about it. Sensitive leaders sensing team morale shifts, artists creating moving work, caregivers offering true comfort. It's about channeling that depth.
Channeling. Okay, so if sensitivity is about feeling deeply, what about processing deeply? Overthinking everything.
The overthinker. Yes.
We've all been there too, right? Analyzing every single detail, replaying conversations endlessly, getting lost in what ifs. It's exhausting.
It really is. Analysis paralysis.
Yeah, and creating these huge imaginary scenarios that frankly distort reality. If I read somewhere, like 90% of the stuff we worry about when overthinking never even happens.
That figure sounds about right. It highlights the struggle. But again, let's look underneath. An overthinker fundamentally has a sharp analytical mind. That's not a flaw. It's a cognitive strength.
How so?
Well, it means you notice details others miss. You're probably less impulsive. You can excel at really complex problem-solving, planning, seeing potential risks way down the line.
Okay, I can see the upside there, the analytical power. But
Yeah.
isn't there a real danger of it just becoming crippling? That analysis paralysis you mentioned. How do you balance being meticulous with actually getting things done?
That is the crucial challenge. The strength is the ability to analyze deeply, not the compulsion to analyze everything into the ground.
Right.
The skill is learning to deploy that superpower strategically, for the big decisions, the complex problems, rather than letting it run wild on every tiny detail. It's about conscious control.
Ability versus compulsion. Got it. Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Another protective trait that can feel like a burden. Being too distrustful.
Building walls.
Yeah. Do you find it hard to let people in? Always questioning motives, double-checking everything, always needing a backup plan for your backup plan.
It sounds exhausting put like that.
It can be. And our sources point out, while caution is smart, constant distrust can really isolate you. It cuts you off from support.
Yeah.
And often it's not just about others. It might be rooted in a fear of your own vulnerability.
Absolutely. And what's often driving that, based on our research, isn't necessarily a character flaw. It's usually a highly developed protective instinct.
Protective.
Yeah, often honed by past experiences. It comes from strong intuition, a deep need for self-preservation, and learning maybe the hard way from what's happened before. It means you're strategic, insightful, definitely not naive.
So it's like an internal radar system, maybe learned through experience rather than just being cynical.
That's a great way to put it, a radar system. The key question then becomes, how do you use that radar, that insight, to make smart judgments without letting it build impenetrable walls that keep out genuine connection?
Finding that balance between cautious and guarded.
Exactly. Wise caution versus unnecessary isolation.
Okay. That protective instinct makes sense, but sometimes guarding ourselves looks different, maybe more like armor. Let's talk about being too prideful.
Pride. A tricky one.
If you really struggle to admit you're wrong or you hate asking for help because self-sufficiency is everything, this might resonate, and the research is pretty clear. Unchecked pride pushes people away. It stops you learning, growing, forming deeper connections.
It does. But here's where it gets really, really interesting psychologically. When we dug into this, we found that clinging fiercely to pride often masks a deep insecurity.
Insecurity, even if someone seems really confident.
Often, yes. It's not always about feeling not good enough in a general way. Sometimes psychological studies suggest it stems from things like conditional love or validation based purely on performance, especially early on. Your self-worth gets tangled up with achievement.
So the pride becomes like armor.
Exactly. Armor against criticism, against rejection, especially if you felt judged harshly or like failure was just not an option.
Wow. Okay, so if pride is armor protecting maybe a fragile self, where does true strength come from? Isn't it from being strong and independent?
Well, the sources we looked at emphasize that true strength often comes from the opposite.
Yeah.
From owning your flaws, not hiding them,
Right.
the courage to be vulnerable, admit mistakes, ask for help. So the really important question to ask yourself is, am I protecting my actual dignity here or just my ego that's terrified of looking less than perfect?
Yeah.
Understanding that root is the first step.
The armor of pride versus real strength, that's powerful. And speaking of striving for perfection, let's talk about the perfectionist.
Oh, yes. The relentless drive.
If this is you, you probably have an amazing work ethic, right?
Right.
A deep desire to excel, you're meticulous, driven, detail-oriented, all good things.
Seemingly, yes.
But ironically, the research shows this pursuit can actually make you less effective. It leads to paralysis, not progress.
The perfection paradox.
Exactly. Nothing ever feels good enough. You set impossible standards, leading to burnout, anxiety. You might even avoid risks altogether, fearing failure so much that you kind of self-sabotage.
It's incredibly common. While that diligence is admirable, the key insight, repeated across sources on productivity and well-being, is simple. Progress beats perfection. Every single time.
So the strength isn't the perfectionism itself.
No. The real strength for a perfectionist lies in learning to consciously release those unrealistic ideals. Knowing when good enough is actually great for moving forward, shifting focus from flawless detail to impactful completion.
So it's not about lowering standards across the board, but maybe redefining done depending on the situation.
Precisely. It's about strategically directing that powerful drive, not letting it stall you.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, another trait linked to protection, but one that can lead to real isolation. Being avoidant.
Keeping distance.
Yeah, if you really value your independence, maybe feel safest just relying on yourself, find it hard to truly open up, keep people at arm's length, this might ring a bell. Research often links this back to past experiences, maybe abandonment or emotional neglect. You learn to push people away before they can hurt you.
It's an understandable defense mechanism.
Yeah.
But here we hit a major paradox, something clear in attachment theory and relationship studies. Avoiding intimacy doesn't actually protect you in the long run.
Oh, so?
It isolates you. It cuts you off from the very support and connection that builds resilience and facilitates healing. True connection actually requires trust, a willingness to be seen.
So self-sufficiency is good, but...
But relationships thrive on mutual support, on vulnerability. While being independent is admirable, that avoidance can create the very loneliness it's trying to prevent.
So the avoidance itself becomes a source of pain?
It absolutely can. The healing often starts when you begin to recognize that emotional closeness isn't necessarily a threat to your independence. It can actually be a source of profound strength.
Wow.
The very thing you fear might be what you need most. It's about reframing vulnerability not as weakness, but as a path to deeper strength and connection.
Reframing vulnerability, that's key. Okay, let's pivot slightly to a trait often born from a desire for connection. being a people pleaser.
The desire for harmony.
Exactly. At its heart, this usually means you have deep empathy, right? You're socially aware, you value harmony, you understand how your actions affect others, and often this leads to really strong relationships.
Kindness is a huge asset,
Yeah.
absolutely. That empathy is a gift. But, and this is the important question it raises, it can make you vulnerable.
Vulnerable how?
Well, sources on social dynamics point out how easily manipulative people can exploit that desire to be liked. Because you might prioritize others' feelings so much, asserting your own boundaries becomes really difficult. Saying no feels almost impossible.
So the very thing that helps build good relationships could also let toxic ones in if you're not careful.
Precisely. The crucial thing isn't to stop being kind, but to develop discernment. Ensuring that your kindness is given to those who genuinely deserve and reciprocate it, not just those who take advantage.
Discernment in kindness. I like that. Okay, final trait, often related to empathy, being too forgiving.
Letting things slide too easily, perhaps.
Yeah. Do you find yourself forgiving quickly, maybe just to avoid conflict? It shows compassion, understanding of mistakes, for sure. But the sources we reviewed suggest forgiving without clear boundaries can actually enable bad behavior.
It can inadvertently teach people that there are no consequences.
Right. And it can also mean you suppress your own anger or frustration, which then just festers into resentment, doesn't it?
It certainly can. This is nuanced, though. Connecting it back to broader psychological principles, true forgiveness isn't really about just letting things go or denying your own feelings. It's about finding a way to heal, while also protecting yourself. Setting clear, firm boundaries is actually part of healthy forgiveness. It teaches others how to treat you respectfully. It ensures forgiveness doesn't come at your own expense.
So it's not about being less forgiving, but maybe more self-aware about how you forgive, ensuring it includes self-respect.
Exactly. The core message, really, from studies on self-respect and relationships is that forgiveness without self-respect isn't actually noble. It's closer to self-neglect.
Mm.
Forgiveness is powerful when it comes from a place of strength and clear boundaries.
That really ties everything together, doesn't it? As we've kind of unpacked all this, the main message from all our sources seems incredibly clear. Your weaknesses don't define you. Not really.
They reveal you.
Right. They reveal you. They shine a light on what you value, where your deepest principles lie, and often, yeah, where your most surprising strengths are hidden.
Absolutely. Think of them like those double-edged swords we mentioned. Powerful tools. The key isn't trying to get rid of them, but really developing that deep awareness.
Yeah.
When you truly understand how these traits work within you, their origins, their downsides, their hidden gifts, you gain the power to use them consciously for your advantage. Instead of letting them work against you, it's about leverage.
Conscious leverage. Okay. So, with all that said, we want to leave you, the listener, with the direct question to think about. What's your weakest trait? The one that nags at you? And more importantly, after hearing all this, how are you going to own it? How are you going to start seeing it maybe as your unique superpower?
Yeah. How will you leverage it?
And just one final thought to ponder as you reflect on that. Think about how acknowledging these perceived flaws doesn't just unlock hidden strengths. It kind of fundamentally changes the whole story of personal growth, doesn't it?
It really does.
It shifts it away from this constant feeling of needing to fix yourself towards something much deeper, self-understanding, self-acceptance, and, well, strategic leverage. Building a life not by fixing who you are, but by truly understanding and using all of who you are.